In 1970, Britain built nearly 2 million cars a year. By 2025, that number may drop below 800,000, a decline not driven by foreign competition or changing consumer habits, but by domestic policy failures. The once mighty industrial backbone that powered the UK's global influence has crumbled under the weight of high energy costs, hostile taxation, and relentless planning obstacles. Automotive plants, shipyards.
The dollar is falling. The empire is fading. But your voice is rising. Don't just watch history happen. Be part of it. Why'd have you checkmark subscribe to this channel for more fearless analysis from Richard Wolff and voices the mainstream media refuses to platform?
Ceramics hubs. Many have closed or moved abroad, taking with them generations of skilled labor. And at the heart of it all is an energy strategy that priced manufacturers out of existence. Severed from cheap Russian gas and committed to an expensive transition without a viable alternative, Britain has made it near impossible for industry to survive. What's left is a country hemorrhaging jobs, shuttering factories, and watching its manufacturing future vanish. But the collapse of industry is just one fault line in a much deeper national crisis. As factories close, tax revenue falls. As debt climbs past £2.9 trillion, the government diverts over £100 billion a year just to service it, funds that once supported healthcare, infrastructure, and local services. The NHS is buckling under the strain. Roads and railways decay. Councils go bankrupt. And in the midst of it all, Britain's political leadership appears frozen, unable to cut, unwilling to spend, too paralyzed to act. Decades of borrowing, compounded by financial crises and pandemic bailouts, have left the economy teetering. Without a credible path forward, the nation faces a stark choice: drift into long-term stagnation or wait for the shock of sudden collapse. Either way, the window for recovery is closing fast. Britain is on the brink, and this isn't hyperbole. What we're witnessing is the unraveling of a nation that once led the world to the Industrial Revolution, now stumbling headfirst into jaws of deindustrialization, debt, and political dysfunction. This isn't one crisis. It's three, all tangled together and feeding off each other in real time. Industry is collapsing, national debt is spiraling, and political leadership has disintegrated into paralysis. Britain isn't just declining, it's actively hollowing out from within. The country that once built empires through coal, steel, and shipyards is fast becoming the first fully deindustrialized nation. Across the country, factories are closing. Automotive plants, shipbuilding yards, and legacy manufacturers that powered generations of British prosperity have gone dark. The very sectors that shaped the nation's identity are vanishing, not because of global forces alone, but because of decisions made in Westminster. Punitive taxes, sky-high energy costs driven by ideological net-zero policies, and suffocating planning restrictions have made it near impossible for industries to survive, let alone thrive. Let's be clear, this is self-inflicted. Successive governments embraced policies that prioritize green targets over energy affordability, hammered businesses with taxes, and created bureaucratic mazes that prevent any meaningful industrial revival. The results? Manufacturing communities are being torn apart. Jobs are vanishing. Local economies are disintegrating. And as the industrial base collapses, so does the foundation of the country's economic resilience. This isn't just about factories. It's about people, skilled workers who now find themselves unemployed and unemployable. Entire regions are being written off. Supply chains are breaking down. Britain no longer makes things at scale, and that makes recovery from this collapse even more difficult. While countries like China, India, and Vietnam are ramping up their industrial output, the UK is retreating. The longer this trend continues, the more irreversible it becomes. Once industrial expertise is lost, it doesn't come back easily. At the same time, the nation's finances are crumbling. The UK's national debt has surged past £2.9 trillion, more than its entire GDP. And it's growing. Every month, the hole gets deeper. Over £100 billion per year is now spent just to service the interest. That's money that could be used for hospitals, schools, roads, rail, housing, but it isn't. It's being poured into a bottomless pit created by decades of economic mismanagement and crisis after crisis. From the oil shocks of the 70s to the 2008 financial crash, to the reckless pandemic-era borrowing, that no one ever tried to unwind. This is not just about big numbers. The UK's fiscal credibility is in jeopardy. Domestic pension funds, once loyal investors in British government bonds, are pulling out. Investor confidence is eroding. Foreign lenders now prop up the system, and that's a dangerous dependency. With global interest rates on a rise, the cost of borrowing is exploding. The risk of a sovereign default is no longer academic. It's a growing concern in economic circles. If confidence in the pound collapses, the consequences would be catastrophic. So where does all that money go if not to public services? The answer is devastating. The NHS is disintegrating. Waiting times are through the roof. Patients die in corridors while hospitals fall apart from years of underfunding. Staff are overworked, underpaid, and leaving profession in droves. Universal health care, once the crown jewel of British society, is now a symbol of its decline, and the decay isn't limited to health care. Infrastructure is failing. Roads across the country are riddled with potholes. Railway projects like HS2 are abandoned midstream. Councils are declaring bankruptcy. Libraries are closing. Social care is slashed. Youth programs disappear. Britain is unraveling at the local level, and the impact on communities is devastating. As services vanish, so does the social fabric that holds the country together. Inequality grows. Discontent spreads. And through all of this, the political system does nothing. There is no coherent plan, no serious intervention, no credible leadership. The government is frozen in place, paralyzed by the impossible trade-offs they themselves help create. Try to cut spending, and you unleash public anger. Try to raise taxes, and you choke what little economic life remains. Consider radical fiscal policies, and you risk spooking the markets. So what do? Nothing. The country grinds forward in a state of managed decline. It's not just inaction, it's systemic inertia. Every route out is blocked by political risk. The leadership class is unwilling to make hard decisions because the public no longer trusts them to act in the nation's interest. Years of broken promises, half measures, and ideological detours have created a climate of deep cynicism. Voters don't believe the system can be fixed, and politicians don't dare try. Even if someone wanted to act, the energy situation makes everything harder. Britain's net zero strategy, implemented with almost religious fervor, has driven energy prices to unsustainable levels. Industry simply cannot compete when power costs more here than almost anywhere else in the developed world. The abandonment of cheap Russian energy, without a credible domestic transition strategy, was an act of economic self-harm. Factories can't operate when the lights don't stay on affordably. Jobs disappear when energy bills triple. And no amount of government subsidies can cover for a system that's structurally broken. Meanwhile, competitors are racing ahead. China, India, and others are building new industrial empires. They're investing in infrastructure, scaling up production, and dominating global supply chains. Britain, by contrast, is shrinking, its relevance fading by the year. The idea that the UK could simply pivot to a service economy and outsource everything else has proven a fantasy. You can't build long-term prosperity without real production. And right now, Britain doesn't produce much of anything. This is the consequence of decades of poor decisions, ideological vanity, and cowardice from across the political spectrum. The country now faces two bleak options. One is a slow, grinding decline, where wages stagnate, public services deteriorate, and the next generation inherits nothing but debt and despair. The other is a sudden crisis, some kind of catastrophic financial collapse that finally forces a reckoning. Many analysts believe it'll take that kind of collapse to break the political paralysis. A sovereign debt crisis, a run on the pound, a complete loss of investor confidence, something sharp enough to shake the nation out of its slumber. But make no mistake, if that moment comes, the cost will be severe. Britain is not prepared for a shock like that. And when institutions are already this fragile, the fallout could be profound. This is not just economic theory. This is Britain's reality. Industrial power? Gone. Fiscal stability? Shattered. Political will? Non-existent. Public trust? Evaporated. The very foundations of the country are cracking, and unless something dramatic changes, that crack becomes a chasm. The United Kingdom is entering an era of managed decay. It will be harder to get health care, harder to get a job, harder to own a home, harder to believe in the promise of a better future. The longer this continues, the more damage is done, not just to the economy, but to the spirit of a nation. Britain is in freefall. The clock is ticking. If you think this story matters, then make your voice heard. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to see the truth, and drop a comment to let us know what you think. And if you want more hard-hitting breakdowns like this, subscribe to the channel. We're not stopping anytime soon. It's one thing for a country to face economic headwinds. It's another thing entirely when its government stands paralyzed while the engine sputters, the brakes fail, and the steering wheel falls off. That's where Britain is right now. Not just in crisis, but in free fall, and no one's grabbing the controls. You'd think, with every red light flashing, collapsing industry, unsustainable debt, crumbling services, vanishing global relevance, some kind of coordinated national effort would kick in. You'd expect urgency, a war room mentality, bold leadership stepping forward. But no, the political response has been dithering speeches, lukewarm policies, and empty gestures. It's like watching firefighters debate climate policy while the building burns to the ground. This isn't just about bad luck or a tough global environment. The most painful truth is that the UK's decline is largely self-inflicted. Britain didn't have to gut its industries. It didn't have to tie its economy to sky-high energy costs. It didn't have to borrow without a plan to repay. And it certainly didn't have to let its political class turn into a sideshow of careerists, technocrats, and ideologues who haven't produced a long-term plan in years. The British people are paying the price. In full, wages are stagnating. The cost of living is rising. Home ownership is becoming a fantasy for millions, not a goal. Young people entering the workforce today have fewer opportunities than their parents. That's not progress. That's regression. Britain is going backwards, and no one in charge seems willing to say it out loud, let alone stop it. The average working person is getting squeezed from every direction. Energy bills are sky high. Taxes are crushing. Public services are disintegrating. And what do they get in return? Delays, dysfunction, and disappointment. Try calling your GP. Try getting your child into a decent school. Try fixing a pothole in your neighborhood. The answer's always the same. Sorry, there's no funding. But there's always funding for MPs' pay raises, vanity projects, and foreign aid initiatives that nobody voted for. And here's the kicker. This isn't temporary. This is structural, built into the system now. The debt keeps growing. The industries don't come back. The political class keeps spinning its wheels, talking tough in interviews, doing nothing behind closed doors. Even reforms that do pass are cosmetic. Tinkering with tax codes, rebranding departments, shuffling cabinet posts. It's all theater while the roof caves in. The United Kingdom, at this moment, is a textbook example of what systemic decline looks like in a modern democracy. Not with riots or tanks or coups, but with slow, grinding decay. Roads crumbling, budgets breaking, services vanishing, hope disappearing. And then there's a broader betrayal. How the promise of national renewal keeps being dangled in front of voters every election cycle, only to be yanked away once the votes are counted. Time and again, the political class pledges to level up, to rebuild, to reindustrialize. And what happens? Nothing. Year after year. Parliament sits in session, consultants write white papers, ministers give speeches, and the factories still close, the debt still balloons, and the public still gets left behind. One of the most destructive myths ever sold to the British people was that the country could thrive without a strong industrial backbone, that it could just pivot to finance, tech, and services, and let the rest of the world make things. That myth has now collapsed, and it's taken entire regions down with it. Cities that were once centers of production, innovation, and pride are now job deserts with shuttered shops and boarded-up windows. And for what? Cheaper imports? Temporary GDP boosts? What Britain gave away in manufacturing strength, it cannot replace with spreadsheets and apps. The hollowing out of real industry is a mistake that will take a generation, if not longer, to reverse. Meanwhile, global competitors aren't sitting still. Countries like China, India, Vietnam, they're not just catching up. They're pulling ahead. They're building infrastructure, expanding energy capacity, creating jobs, dominating supply chains. While Britain can't even finish a railway line without trimming it down, scaling it back, or abandoning it altogether. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Once you fall behind in industrial power, you lose leverage. You lose influence. You lose the ability to shape your own future. You become dependent on energy imports, on foreign capital, on global supply chains that you no longer control. Britain, once a global industrial titan, now imports steel. It imports energy. It imports the very basics of modern life from countries it used to outproduce. That's the cost of this decline. And it's a cost that gets higher every year. Meanwhile, the public is told to tighten their belts, to be patient, to wait for the benefits of long-term reforms that never come. But patience is running out. The frustration in communities up and down the country is boiling over. People are tired of the excuses, tired of the slogans, tired of the empty promises. They want results. They want factories open, not shuttered. They want affordable energy, not punitive green levies. They want homes they can buy, jobs they can keep, and public services that work. These aren't radical demands. They're the basics of a functioning country. And that brings us back to the central issue, leadership. Or more accurately, the vacuum where leadership should be. Britain is governed by people who can't, or won't, make the tough choices. They tinker with tax bans while entire sectors collapse. They quote economic forecasts while ignoring the lived reality of millions. They talk about fiscal responsibility while shoveling billions into a debt hole with no bottom. What's worse is the unwillingness to challenge the economic orthodoxy that got the country here in the first place. The obsession with short-term gains over long-term planning. The refusal to invest in self-sufficiency. The addiction to foreign capital, cheap labor, and globalist trade policies that leave the country vulnerable every time a global shock hits. The solution is not simple, but it's not complicated either. The country needs to rebuild its industrial base. It needs energy policy rooted in affordability and resilience, not ideological purity. It needs fiscal discipline that prioritizes investment over vanity. And most importantly, it needs a government that actually governs with purpose, courage, and urgency. But right now, none of that is happening. And so, the crisis deepens. Every month, the numbers get worse. Every quarter, more industries shut down. Every year, the services degrade a little more. And all the while, the political system keeps churning out press releases, while reality keeps sinking. There is no soft landing here. There is stagnation, or there is collapse. And if something doesn't change soon, the system won't just stumble, it will break. It's already happening in slow motion. A sovereign debt crisis is no longer unthinkable. A run on the pound is entirely plausible. And when confidence finally snaps, when markets lose faith in British bonds, when investors pull out, when pension funds bail, there won't be time for committees or inquiries or roundtable discussions. It will be fast and brutal. That may be what it takes to finally jolt the political class awake. But by then, the damage will be immense. Jobs lost, services obliterated, entire communities uprooted. And once those systems collapse, rebuilding them is far more costly and far less certain. That's the choice Britain faces now. Painful reform or catastrophic failure. The window for action is small, and it's closing. The public deserves to know what's coming. They deserve the truth. Not PR spin. Not economic jargon. Not half-truths about growth forecasts and fiscal headroom. The country is in crisis, and the only way out is bold, unapologetic change. Not tomorrow. Not after the next election. Now, there's a hard truth the political class refuses to say out loud. Britain isn't working. The system is broken, fundamentally, structurally, and morally. And no one at the top seems remotely serious about fixing it. Because fixing it means confronting decades of failure. It means admitting that the energy strategy was a disaster. That deindustrialization wasn't inevitable. It was a choice. That the debt pile wasn't a one-time emergency. It's the result of kicking down the road for 40 years straight. But now there's no road left. And the British public, they know. You can see it in their faces. The resignation, the frustration, the hollowed-out belief that politics can fix anything anymore. They watch prime ministers come and go, each promising renewal, each leaving the country worse than they found it. They've heard the slogans, Build Back Better, Leveling Up, Global Britain. All empty, all forgotten. Meanwhile, life gets harder. Buses run late, if at all. Hospitals take weeks to return calls. Taxes go up, but services shrink. Teachers are overwhelmed. Nurses are walking out. Councils go bankrupt. And through all of it, Whitehall keeps spinning its wheels, locked in a loop of half measures, temporary fixes, and endless consultations. And here's the part no one wants to face. This decline isn't just economic. It's existential. The country doesn't know what it is anymore. Not a manufacturing powerhouse. Not a global empire. Not a modern, confident service economy. Just something in between. Drifting. Shrinking. Aging. Debating whether to spend more on defense or heat the schools. There's no plan. There's no consensus. Just a hollowed-out political center, a furious public, and a leadership class that treats economic collapse like a PR challenge. And yet, they keep telling the people to wait. Wait for the next budget. Wait for inflation to ease. Wait for the green economy to kick in. But people aren't stupid. They see the bills rising. They see the factories closing. They see their kids moving away because there's nothing left in their towns. So what now? Another decade of managed decline? Another round of austerity wrapped in climate rhetoric? Another government promising the moon and delivering potholes? It doesn't have to be this way. But doing something different means breaking the cycle. It means leadership with guts, policies with backbone, an energy strategy that doesn't bankrupt the economy, a budget that serves people, not just markets, a real industrial policy that makes things, creates jobs, and rebuilds pride. Because if that doesn't happen soon, this slow decline won't stay slow. It'll turn sharp, ugly, irreversible. And when that day comes, when the markets panic, when the pound crashes, when the hospitals stop functioning, don't let them say it was unforeseen. Don't let them blame the people. They saw it coming. They all did. If you want to stop the freefall, we need to make noise. Loudly. Share this. Like it. Comment. Subscribe. And keep the pressure on. The country is running out of time, but not out of people who care. Let's be the ones who didn't stay silent. Let's fight for a Britain that works again.